this is Perfect 10. And to me, Perfect 10 is the flagship series of Genuine Comics. It is the foundation for the Genuineverse. Might not be the first book ever released in the Genuineverse, but given the fact that there's 4 issues and the 5th one is on the way, and the fact that her story is so interesting and intriguing and sets up so much, I would say threads that can be tied up in other, books and series in the Genuineverse, really leads me to say that this is the foundation for a really interesting superhero universe. So, like I said, this isn't just a review of one issue. This is an overview of 4 issues of Perfect 10. So issues 1, 2, 4. So if we can get them all into frame, we're going to go and give a nice overview of all these books and explain why this entire series is worth your time and money. But we are going to go into the book itself. So this is the first issue, and the artist is Pal Rodrigues. Dave Brink is the writer, and that is the very consistent team throughout the 4 issues. Colorists and letters have changed throughout the series, but Dave writing and Pal doing the pencils and inks have been consistent. This is a very interesting premise. So you've got 10, and she is a android called a synthoid. This is an android made out of artificial human tissue that's regenerative. So this gives her the ability to regenerate from wounds. She's more resistant to them. And of course, she's got super strength, super agility, and she's a stone cold assassin when she's programmed to be like that. And of course, she's got this very interesting suit as well, and she's got powers associated with that, being able to upload weapon schematics and generate them as long as her gloves are holding them is also very interesting as well. So she's got this really interesting power set that makes her an interesting character in the action sense, but she's also got this very interesting moral and ethical dilemma, and that is really something that underscores the entire book. And there's times where it comes up and is the main focus, but given all of the action and all of the superheroes and villains that are introduced throughout the story, really, like I said, makes that an undertone. And the focus is Perfect 10 trying to survive and take down all the superheroes, I'd say not all the superheroes, all the villains that she runs into. And those are, I believe, meta-normals is the term that the Genuineverse likes to use for superpowered beings. But Virgil Pratt runs the Perfection Program, and the Perfection Program makes these synthoids, like I said, these humanoid androids with this, synthetic tissue. They're programmed to be assassins, so they're sent on missions, and their minds are wiped, so they have no sense of self or sense of identity, and it's absolutely, I'd say absolutely, no memories of anything between missions. But when the facility that 10 is in gets destroyed, she's not able to be reprogrammed, so she's sentient and aware. And like I said, this really starts the deep moral and ethical dilemma that I said underscores this entire series, and part of what makes it so interesting and intriguing to me. And the next thing that makes this book interesting and intriguing, I want to not focus on the opening on issue 1 too much, because she starts out, she's completely naked. Pal Rodrigues does some very creative censor work with that, but I'm sure YouTube would still get mad if I showed it for any length of time. But the character designs are really what brings me in. You've got Chernobyl, who's a villain. I think it's probably like one of the best designed villains just in like any comic I've seen. Of course, you've got Perfect 10 and her design. This is Calamity. She's definitely much more important in the 4th issue. You've got Max Magenta, who's like Cecil in Invincible, basically being like the handler, kind of like Nick Fury from the MCU, Commissioner Gordon, that sort of character who's the one who's like managing the heroes. And definitely I'd say more like Cecil is the best, analogous character I can use. Even his design, I would say, is interesting, even though he's not meant to be super striking like Calamity is. Or I would say a character like, I can find her, character like Diabolica, right? So you got Diabolica, you got Crimson, and that's a storyline that goes out through issue 3. So there's a lot of moving parts because there's so many characters that Dave wants to introduce, all these threads he wants to set up to tie later in Perfect 10, and of course in other issues as well. There's Power Trip, which is going to be this series that collects short stories, which I think is a really interesting avenue to tell short stories. Of course, you've got American Bliss, which is ongoing. It's one issue. I'm sure number 2 is on the way. That takes place within the Genuineverse. So there's threads you can set up in Perfect 10 that you can tie off in American Bliss. And of course, you've got, I think, Earthling and Dream Girl are also part of the Genuineverse as well. But like I said, Perfect 10, I think, serves as a really good foundation and a really good flagship book for the Genuineverse, given, like I said, it's really the fact that Perfect 10 or 10 is just such an interesting character in and of herself. Not only is she interesting from an action perspective, because she's got fantastic action throughout the entire book. I think if you're going to highlight 10's action scenes, she's got a lot of really cool action scenes, stuff like that. But all of the action in this book is brought very well, or is brought to life very well by Pal Rogers. He does fantastic work, and I will just flip through some here. So the focus is more on panels like this, especially if I can go and I can see stuff like this when you've got action going on. It's very dynamic, it's very striking, and it's less of the full like one-page spreads, or even I can show off a one, even though you still have your one-page spreads. It's more of a focus. You got one-page spreads, you got two-page spreads, but it's less of focusing on these, even though these scenes do show up and they look really good. It's more of a focus on scenes like, let's say, more of a focus on showing the action through this, with a broad focus on panels, and using those panels and that affording you the ability to change perspective pretty quickly, to showcase a lot of real dynamic action. Of course, all of this is weaved together with pretty good exposition. I definitely think, since this is only 4 issues, and these are all standard comic book length, and I'm going to put these here so I can keep talking about this fantastic series. This is definitely a lot of threads that are being set up, so I could definitely see, especially since this is taking some cues from Invincible, especially in issue 3. You've got Crimson's story. It reminds me of Angstrom Levy, and like I said, you've got Max Magenta. If I can show them off here, that's Max Magenta, reminding me a lot of Cecil. It's just a lot of cues that, or I'd say cues that are being taken from Invincible, and that was a 117 issue series, so I could definitely see Perfect 10 having a storyline of that magnitude. And if that is the plan, then we are at the tail, or we are at the very beginning of the story. So this is really where the establishment is happening. This is really setting up to get to a pretty good, big conclusion in Perfect 10 that sets up the next big storyline. That's what I would say is being worked towards in these first 4 issues. Of course, that big event, or I could say that big conclusion that ties up the first storyline, we move into the next one, could happen before issue 10, but I'd say by issue 10, having that and setting up the next big thing for 10's story is definitely what I envision. But with that being said, that's still 6 more issues to really develop and flesh out the story. And it's not that it's unearned or unjustified, or it's really just waiting out with a bunch of cliffhangers. I think each of these stories are interesting on their own, but they're all parts of a more cohesive narrative, and that's still at the very beginning of being built. But with what is here so far in these first 4 issues, is certainly worth investing in. Like I said, 10 is a very interesting and unique character. I love the idea of mixing queuing consciousness with machinery. It always leads to a lot of very interesting moral dilemmas, and I think that's something that's going to keep underscoring this story, and mixing that in with the superhero action just makes it for a really fantastic read. It's something I highly recommend you look into. I will have Genuine Comics linked in the description of this video, so be sure to check them out if this at all interests you. Really love Perfect 10. Like I said, the main thing is the fact that she is basically a superpowered android that is programmed to kill, and she becomes sentient. And that's a really interesting plot line. The fact that she exists in a Genuineverse, a superhero comic book universe that is in the process of being built out, is just like the icing on top. That's like very much an interesting story in and of itself, but having it exist in a superhero comic book universe is even more interesting, because there's more stuff you can find out that just enriches the experience that you have while reading her book. But with that, I don't have anything else to say. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this overview. Joker is out.